Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 110. John Mendez, podcasting for impact, how books and life experience determined his focus. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another The Builders. Today we are joined by John Mendez. Welcome to the show, sir.
Matt, I'm super excited to be here, man. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Been a while since we last caught up, so excited to see where our conversation takes us today.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah, so you're compared to me, you're young, you're vibrant, you got a lot of energy, and I love that. I try to bring as much energy as I can, in my old age. But no, you're doing some amazing things. We'll talk about that today, what you're all doing, podcasts and all this stuff, and we're going to talk a little bit about just other things. A book we both picked up at about your age. So, but the way we start off, especially when somebody is first time on this podcast, is we learn a little bit about you, your journey, what you're all about, who's influenced you, what influenced you to do what you're doing today, and kind of your trajectory and where you're going with your life here, how you ended up being the amazing guy you are today. So I'm going to throw it to you. You can make this as short, medium, long, whatever you want, whatever you think will be interesting to the audience.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, and I'll get a little bit deeper. But before I dive into the story, man, I want to preface it by sharing just one quote. It's the reason I see further than most is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, to hop on a time travel machine and go back in time with me. So I grew up in a project. There was 9 of us in a 2-bedroom. My mother suffered from mental health issues, and as a kid, that's extremely hard to kind of even grasp or even understand. So for me, in my head, she wasn't the mom that I needed her to be, and I never understood why. And then my father was absent in my life, so my grandparents who immigrated from Dominican Republic raised me. And so for me, growing up, I never had a role model. Now, they would always ask me in school, they would always ask questions like, who's your role model? Who do you want to be like when you grow up? And I'd put my grandma as a filler, but in all reality, I never really had that one person I could look up to. And so for my whole life, I pretty much was super open-minded. And I was very fortunate because I always tried to take away the best parts of people that I've seen and leave out all the negative and the bad parts. And I became kind of like this giant melting pot of different perspectives as I kind of got older and I got further along in my journey. Was never a born entrepreneur. I didn't have the paper out. I didn't have the candy bars that I was selling at school. I wasn't flipping sneakers on the side with my friends. But I always had entrepreneurs around me. My friends, as I said, they would always flip sneakers. But it never sparked anything in me. Now, fast forward a little bit. Now I'm in college. Schools always came by super easy for me. So getting to college was relatively very easy. And then my March 2020, the spring semester of my freshman year, boom, the pandemic takes over the world. And so now, for a little bit of more context, I went to college for 2 reasons, right? To learn how to live on my own and to network. Those were the only 2 reasons I went in. Now I'm in college, fall 2020. The entire world is in a pandemic. I can't network because everyone has their cameras off, and it's a giant 300-room Zoom room with no one presenting at all besides the teacher. And then I can't learn how to live on my own because I'm waking up from my 8 a.m.s, my 9 a.m.s, and literally just rolling out of my bed, turning my laptop on, signing in, and then going back to bed. So I wasn't learning how to live on my own because I was home. And so for me, it was around that time period, though, where I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that shifted my paradigm entirely for me to realize that there's another way of viewing the world out there that wasn't being taught at home, that wasn't being taught at school, that wasn't being taught in my environment that I grew up in. And I was curious because I love learning. But the only catch was you had to make it make sense and you had to tie it to something that is actually valuable to my life. And so for me, when I realized that there's another way of dealing with money and managing finances and investing and things like that, that people out there are talking about and teaching on, and I want to learn more about it. So that winter break between fall and spring, I just jumped into the personal finance rabbit hole, started learning about all this stuff like credit cards, index funds, bank accounts, yada yada yada. And the next spring semester, I came back and it's like I seen the light, and I couldn't go back to just being a regular old college student taking gen ed classes that have nothing to do with anything. And so I decided to sign up for my real estate class, stop showing up to my college class, and then I've been in the entrepreneurship world since.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So you dropped out of college?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's spring 2021.
Oh, you made it how long? Semester? A year?
No, a year and a year in person, and then fall the entire fall. So I made it 3 full semesters, and then
Okay.
that fourth semester, beginning like a couple weeks in, I was just like, man, yeah, I'm out of here. So I
Yeah.
just stopped. I mean, it was easy to stop showing up. I just had to not log into Zoom, and then I had
It's
my
full
real
of
estate
stuff.
classes. I had my real estate classes. So I would just sign into that instead.
Wow. Yeah. No, I say that from somebody that also did. We have some similarities at about your age.
Yeah.
I'm decades older. But I went to school and I lasted a semester. I took some business classes, an art class, because I was into art, and then I dropped out. And it's a whole story. But I went back for a little while. I never really completed. I took a lot of classes. But my real world experience came from the real world.
Yeah.
And but no, your story is, man, I can imagine there's so many people that can relate to it, that have grown up in either broken homes or their parents weren't there, or, didn't support them, and thank goodness you had grandparents to step in to help you out. And I mean, there's probably a lot you went through there, but what's fascinating to me is just how you navigated that with such a positive attitude. Was it always, did you have moments you were like, that you had negative influences and you just started to go down the wrong path, or how did you steer yourself through that?
Yeah, I've been very blessed. Growing up in the projects, you see a spectrum that most people never ever get to experience. And people think as, wealth and poverty as like a binary thing where it's like it's either one or the other. But in reality, it's a spectrum. So I've been fortunate to see people who have summer homes in the Hamptons and spend time with them at their summer homes. And there it's like extreme luxury, super lavish. Like the house I stayed at for a week, this is in middle school. It was my friend's dad's boss's summer house. So the house just in the basement had a movie theater, a sauna room, a yoga room, a full gym, a ping pong table, and like almost 6 beds just in the downstairs alone. And then around the entire house, there was like a giant go-kart track. The house had a full court basketball hoop and a tennis court and a pool and a jacuzzi all on the premise. So it's like super wealthy. But then on the complete opposite side of that, I have friends that are doing a lot of time. And witnessing both sides, it opens your minds up. And I've been very fortunate where I ended up going to church around 3rd grade when I started going to church. So that definitely helped instill in me a lot of good foundational values that I still keep very near and dear to my heart to this day. And just growing up, and my grandparents always told me to stay out of trouble. And for me, I had friends that have gone down the wrong road, and I had friends that gone down a really good road. And I don't know at what age it was, but at some point I realized that once we're of conscious age to make decisions, everything that we do in life falls on us. So I had a choice. I could either be a product of my environment, or I could be a product of my decision, and I chose the latter. And I've been kind of just living my life that way since.
Oh, well, good for you. Because a lot of people go the other way, right? Yeah. So you found your way through all that, and you've landed at finding Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is another thing. There's a parallel here. I'm not trying to compare myself to you, but
No ways.
I grew up in a like kind of middle class, whatever. So I didn't experience what you experienced there, but at the same time, I was that kind of teenager who was angry at the world, angry at their parents, rebelled, partied, wanted to have, I had kind of, yeah, that was me. But somehow I navigated through that. And I was also, I know we talked about this when we first talked, picking up Think and Grow Rich, which was the first book for me that changed my perspective about everything. And I don't know, like you though, I never had anybody in my life that had this information. They didn't share it with me anyway. And I was just out. We had bookstores back then we'd go to, and there's this golden book on the shelf, and I don't know what attracted me to it. Like I don't know if it was I like thinking, and I'm thinking about growing rich. So if I can think my way to that sounds good. But I picked it off the shelf, read it. I probably read it a dozen times through my 20s, pretty much the same age as you. And it really, to this day, it really shapes a lot of my thinking, how I approach life. And now, when you discovered, so you did Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. That was the financial side of things. He gets into, how to kind of manage that side of things, how to look at things. What was the biggest lessons from that book, do you think, that you could share?
The biggest lessons, really, from what I can remember, aren't the actual lessons. It was just the seed that it planted. That's why I had so much weight in my life. It planted a seed. It made me realize, made me become aware of the way my grandparents viewed the world. And it made me realize that there was another way that people out there viewed the world. And it sparked the curiosity in me for me to go and figure out, where are the people that think like the rich dad? What are they doing? What are they listening to? What do they do in their day-to-day? How are they living such that, so that they can live that life that people that grew up where I grew up always aspire to live, but never end up, always end up coming short. So for me, it was really the seed that it planted, more so the actual practical lessons that are in the book. And then for me, Think and Grow Rich was my fourth book that I read. The second book that I read was I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and that book was a lot more practical than Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I took away so much from I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It's by Ramit Sethi. Love that book. I highly recommend it. It talks about, credit cards you should use, index funds, budgeting. But it's like you could read a couple pages in that book and then go out and apply for that same bank account. Like, it was super duper practical, that book. That's why I love that one. And then Index Funds for Dummies. It's just a pretty straightforward book. Index Funds for Dummies. But then book number 4 was Think and Grow Rich. And that's the first book that really, I felt like every word almost floated off the page. It really just instilled in me a different mindset that I've never, ever heard before. And that book was so foundational in my just changing my thought process and shifting my paradigm, because, as I said, that was never, ever introduced to me in any point in my life. Of course, as I said, I've seen people who are wealthy, but it's never like anyone put it to words the way that book did. So reading Think and Grow Rich, I could just remember it's like every page I was so excited to read. And I had the self-confidence formula. I had a whiteboard on my door. I actually fell down recently, so I got to get some more command strips to put it back up. But on my whiteboard in the bottom right corner, I'd have the self-confidence formula. And I forget, but it's 5 steps. It pretty much says, like, I will have a clear aim for my life. I will be able to, I forget it, but I used to read it every morning and every night religiously before I started my day, before I laid my head to rest, for like almost 5 months straight. And then, that book really, at that point in time where I was just entering my journey, it was so easy to grasp, but at the same time, so revolutionizing to the way I thought about things and viewed the world.
That's awesome. And I think that kind of seeing that, those affirmations every day when you wake up or whatever, you just surround yourself with that stuff. I think it does, it sort of rewires your brain, right? And to think more positively and to focus on these things rather than the negative things. I probably drive my Facebook people crazy. because I have this habit of just hunting down like positive quotes all the time and reposting them on Facebook. And
Yeah.
and most people probably never. I don't even know if the algorithm shows anything shows them to anybody. But for me, that's kind of that continued practice. I'm always. It's like I don't know if I do it once a day, but numerous times a week, I sit down and just do that. Just look through positive quotes and just read them. Even though I've seen that quote probably 500 times, I let it just sit with me, and it just becomes part of you. And because there's so many things that can distract you, and there's so much negativity out there, and to just continually try to feed that information yourself is really, really useful. So having a list like that and going through that all the time is powerful. So you picked up Think and Grow Rich, and all these books are, really interesting. Focused on the financially, focused on the mental attitude, and changing how you're looking at the world. Where does that take you from there? How do you start applying that to your life?
Yes. So around that time, so for a little bit of context around the timeline, that's around the time when I decided to drop out of school. And I'm reading these books, and it's like my brain is just being exploded every couple seconds because I'm reading these books. I was listening to these podcasts and YouTube videos and all these different things. And now just going back to school, and I'm learning about things that don't matter about anything. And it's like these books have taught me in this short window of time more about life and wealth and money and finances and all these different topics than I'd ever learned in all my years of schooling combined.
That's the crazy thing, right? Isn't that crazy?
But,
like you. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and I've spoken to one guy whose podcast I hopped on, and he's a teacher himself, and he brings up a good point because we can't always blame the educational system, right? Because majority of these teachers are living a poor life themselves. They're stuck in the rat race. They're stuck in this. So it's like, you can't guide someone to where you've never been before. And so if we're going to have all these teachers who are not financially independent, who are not financially savvy, start teaching us about these different topics, it's not going to work out the best. And now the entrepreneurs, they're not in schools because they have their own businesses and things like that, but they do have courses. So the information is out there. And a lot of people are now, with these whole content marketing play on full blast, a lot of this information is starting to get even more accessible than it already is. And it was already extremely accessible. So now it's like, if you don't see none of this stuff now, I would be concerned because this information is so out there that unless you're just algorithms for your social media is just geared towards super negative, non-productive stuff, it's almost virtually impossible not to see some of these entrepreneur people on your feed talking about these things. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have seen most of these entrepreneurs at some point or another, whether it's through advertisements or whether it's through just organic feed posts that the algorithm shows you. It's so accessible now.
Yeah. You have more. I don't know if it's just a misunderstanding of how these social sites work, but I think people have to understand they have more control over what they see than they think. It's based on what you're interacting with, engaging with, and who you actually follow. So if you're following people that are negative and have, are just posting junk, that's what you're going to be fed. And but if you start just following people that are positive and are bringing the lessons, if you want to be an entrepreneur, follow entrepreneurs. Like on Twitter, I follow other entrepreneurs. I follow agencies. I follow people that are into SEO and all that nerd stuff. That's what I follow. Some of them are once in a while I have to unfollow a few of those, but in the tech space. But no, it's you see what you engage with, and like you said, it's become so. Because of the competitive landscape and there's so much out there and everyone's competing, it is a lot more accessible. It's easier to get to that information. So and as an entrepreneur, there's so many entrepreneurs that either dropped out of school or but they still figured it out because they learned the things you don't learn in school or found other ways. So
And so, to continue on with the story, right? So around that time, so we're on the topic of social media. I actually deleted my social media, And I was like, I'm not going to re-download any of these platforms until I get my real estate license. So now this is early, like mid Q1 of 2021 when I'm on this journey. I really embark. I start working close to 70 hours. I'm starting my real estate courses. And so I was trying to juggle all that at the same time. I ended up getting licensed 2 weeks after I turned 20 in September. Around that same time, I ended up getting the idea from a friend to start a podcast. He ended up going back to college. I had already left college to pursue my real estate career. And so for me, I scheduled didn't match up anymore, but I knew I still wanted to move forward. And so after about 4 months or so of procrastinating, that's when I finally came up with the name Walk to Wealth. And the story behind the name is for the 99% of us that aren't overnight sensations. It's a long walk to wealth. And some people may walk faster than others, but what good is sprinting to the finish line if you pass out when you cross it? And so that's how I got into what I'm focused on today.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, walk to wealth. It doesn't happen overnight. Overnight successes, they probably have 10, 20 years of grinding to get where they are. Took me 30.
It's a long time,
that's
man.
awesome.
It takes a long time of work, man. A lot of work and a lot of not getting distracted. That was my big thing. I'm a very creative person. So once you get into entrepreneurship, you don't really have the guard railing, kind of like bowling, right? When you bowl, and sometimes you have the railings up on the side. But it's like when you go out on your own and you have creativity and there's no one to kind of make sure you're in check, that creativity can lead you down so many different paths that you end up not making any progress on any of the paths at all.
Yeah, you got too many ideas floating, or you get distracted by that shiny object and that shiny object, and you're trying to, it can be challenging, especially if you spend a lot of time online. Yeah, that's for sure. So why real estate? So because you were reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad, so
yeah,
that led you to think, real estate. Yeah.
So the story behind that, around that winter break time, right, to flashback a little bit, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, oh, real estate. And I started listening to this podcast. And I was like, okay, real estate is an interesting thing. And I seen this Facebook ad. And the Facebook ad was like, get into real estate, no money down, no credit necessary, no experience necessary. I was like, okay, perfect. This might be a sign. And it's called wholesaling. And essentially the idea behind it, for anyone that doesn't know, it's pretty much, let's say Matt wants to sell his house. He wants to sell it for $100,000. It's probably usually in bad shape, or he has extreme urgency that he has to get rid of it extremely quickly and he can't put it on the market or doesn't want to put it on the market. And then I find a house, I get it under contract, and then I find an end buyer. Let's say the end buyer wants to buy for $110,000. Matt sells the house, buyer buys the house, I keep the $10,000 difference, everybody wins, everybody's happy, and so on and so forth. Only catch is usually you have to stay off market entirely, because unless you are a licensed realtor, I just so happen to be a licensed realtor, but at that time I wasn't. But unless you're a licensed realtor, you can't get paid for a real estate transaction. So you have to keep it off market entirely. That's how it's legal. You keep it off market. And so then from there, I sign up for this course. I get my logo name, my domain name. I get my logo. I get my LLC filed. It was going to get going. And then I spoke to a couple of attorneys. And at that point in time, as I said, I didn't know that you could do it as long as you stay off market. So I talked to one of these attorneys. Most of them didn't know what they were talking about, because most attorneys don't work with actual savvy investors. But one of the guys that I did, and he seemed like he knew what he was talking about. And he pretty much was like, oh, you can't do wholesaling. A lot of people are signing up for these courses and yada, yada, yada. Had I know what I know now, I know that that was complete BS. But at that time, he was the professional. So I was like, okay, my dreams are kind of ruined now. I want to get into real estate. This is my chance. Kind of was like, okay. But a couple months later, I ended up getting on a Zoom call with a guy who was like my mentor for a little while. He was in commercial real estate. But that's how I got that spark to get my real estate license. And I always wanted to get into public speaking. So I was like, okay, I'll become a real estate agent. I can turn that into a career, become really good at it, use the money to buy investment properties, use the credibility to start getting people to want to book me on stages, and then everyone's happy. And so, because I really wanted to get back into the real estate investing side of things. But as my journey started unfolding and I started progressing, I started getting opportunities to speak, and opportunities that I didn't foresee during that time period start opening up. And then from there, I just kind of pivoted as I went. And now I'm not really focused on real estate. I'm actually not focused on real estate at all whatsoever. I still have an active license so I could use as for referral. So a little bit of a passive income stream. But for the most part, just going all in on growing the show and cultivating that audience. And now I'm starting to land like a lot heavier guest. So it's like I'm finally starting to project in the right direction. It took a long work, and as you know, as a podcaster, if you're coming in this podcasting industry without an audience already pre-built, it's extremely tough to get it going. So I'm just now getting over, I wouldn't say I'm over the hump yet, but I'm just now like approaching the hump to finally get over it.
Some momentum to go over that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm going to rewind again a little bit here. So you get doing the real estate thing, but then you throw in there that you wanted to be on stage. Why did you gravitate to that or want to do that? Like to speak or whatever, get in front of people.
Yeah, I can't really put my thumb on it, and I wish I could, but something within me that just wants to impact more. Okay. And I had it in me. I love talking. I can talk your head off if you let me. I'm one of those guys. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If you catch me and we're having a conversation and we start picking up a little bit, I can talk your head off for hours. But one of you guys at the K Jewelers that I was working at said I had the gift of gab. And I didn't know what that was. It's a little bit of an older term. So he explained this to me. He was like, "Oh, you're someone that could talk a lot." And so that kind of planted the seed. Like, okay, I have a knack for talking. And that's when I realized it. And then I always felt like I was a pretty good communicator. But that was when I realized it, because someone from the externally looked in and pointed that out. And so for me, I always had a feeling that I wanted to impact more people. And with public speaking, you can get on a stage and speak for an hour and boom, lives change left and right. So I was like, that's pretty interesting. That sounds like something I want to do. And so as I started getting into real estate, that's kind of how the plan was going to work. I was going to become a top agent in the area, become rookie of the year, start selling houses. And then people are going to be like, oh my goodness, this young kid is killing it. We got to get him on our stage. We got to interview him. We got to figure him out. And it didn't end up turning out that way, but I'm still getting, into the public speaking space just a different way now and not the way I originally planned.
That's how it works though in life, That's
what I'm finding out.
Yeah. I mean, you can it's important to have a vision. It's important to have goals and dreams, and you can map it all out in your head, especially if you're a creative person. You can see it all. And oftentimes, the road curves a little bit or it goes off in a different direction, but you still get somewhere. It's not where you were planning on going, but sometimes it's better, or it's just where you were meant to go. And so you kind of have to go with that flow. But it's important to have something to drive you, but then also be flexible enough to adapt and take on opportunities because you don't know what opportunities are going to arise as you're going along. So, that's fantastic. And I love the fact that I think what drives you is the desire to impact people, to help people. And that's in you. And maybe that comes from your background of seeing what you've seen in your life, and then or that those aha moments when you read those books, you're like, more people need to hear this information, and you can. I love that's your thing.
Yeah, so. it was the books. Honestly, it was like as soon as I read those books, it was like there's no way I just went my whole life without learning about any of this stuff. It's like, and people say I started early. But it's like, if I can help other people start even earlier than me, how much more ahead? And just like, it's back to that old saying of a high tide raises all ships. So it's like, if I could get other young people on this, because young people, that's a very hard crowd to try to get after, because it's like, you can't tell them anything. They're already in their rebel years. And it's not wavy. It's not cool like the people my age say. That's the terminology we use, right? So not hip, right? People in the older generation say, right? So for people my age, it's hard to crowd to reach, but it's like, if you're too far off from the dock, people can't resonate with you because your ship has already set sailed. And so, like, my unique value proposition is like, I'm still at the dock loading up the cargo, loading up the ship. We haven't taken off yet, but I'm still documenting the journey. I'm still showcasing the journey. I'm still bringing on people who have already long since taken off and learning from them and sharing the advice I learned from them. So it's like, it makes it so much more relatable because the people I'm trying to target are the same people in the age group of the people I went to high school with, the people I grew up with. I'm still at that point where a lot of people wait until they're successful to start giving back. And the issue with that is if people feel as if the ship is too far away from the dock, that they can't resonate with that person because they already set sail. They're too far away. So if you, I'm still within arm's reach of most of the people that I'm trying to target. I'm still in that same age group of the people I went to high school with, the people I went to college with. Those are the people that I'm trying to target. Because a lot of people tell me, "Hey, John, you started so early. I wish I started when I was your age." But it's back to that old adage of a high tide raises all ships. And so if I can get these people my age started earlier than I even started, that would just raise the game for all of us and really get a big wave of really successful, hungry entrepreneurs that never had the entrepreneur in them created. And I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that I wasn't a born entrepreneur, but I came to the realization that we all are born entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur and a kid, the only thing difference is that an entrepreneur knows how to run a business. That's really the only difference because they're both super creative, visionaries, dreamers, big thinkers. Like you can't tell a kid anything. They'll dream and think whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's not until they experience some sort of trauma or had some hard times or maybe some stress or upbringing, not having a parent, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that usually goes on, and that entrepreneur within them doesn't die, but just gets tucked so deep away that some people never ever get to experience that entrepreneur in them, that kid in them. Some people spend their whole life before finally coming across it, and some people rediscover it, and then there's a small percentage of people that just had it cultivated since birth and just kind of got on the right track and had people in their life that helped them with that. For the vast majority of people, we have to kind of rediscover it at some points in our life. And so for me, starting the podcast, it was just like my way of kind of like, hey, I'm not successful yet. I still want to help you guys. I'm still figuring out this game. I'm going to be transparent, showcase my journey, hopefully inspire some people, hopefully educate some other people. But I'm on this journey. We're loading up ship right now. We're about to set sail. If you want to hop on the movement, come on, hop on while we're still here. Of course, I'm going to still showcase the journey even when we do set sail eventually. But for the time being, it's like the people I'm still trying to reach are people that are within arm's reach from me and just keeping that going.
Man, you totally get it. You're so right. Because I couldn't talk to that audience. I mean, I could. I mean, most kids think I'm funny. They like my jokes. But no, but it's right. I love that saying that you're using. You're too far away from the dock. They've set sail already, but you're in that right now. You're in that journey. I can relate to this relate to this from an agency perspective, right? So my thing is to help. What drives me is to help other agencies and freelancers and stuff navigate their way and create a better business and stuff. And that's sort of my thing. But I'm doing that as I'm building it. I'm doing it as I'm in it, in the trenches, building my own business. And I'm not, too far away from the dock yet. So the people that are in kind of my situation or have just starting an agency or all that. So, and they can relate to me, and maybe they're in similar age groups and stuff. So, but if anyone's going to impact the people that you're focused on there, it's going to be you because you're doing it. You're a great example. You talked earlier on about you didn't have really a role model growing up, right? You can be that role model and inspire others just by, they say, I can't think of the quote off the top of my head, but basically you can teach people and inspire people by doing it, not just by what you say, but by what you're doing. And that's why sharing your story and your journey is so powerful because, people can relate to that, especially at that age group. I think that's fantastic. I think you're going to have a lot of impact and using podcasting as a platform to spread that message. Yeah.
It's one of those things where people don't realize the effect that sharing a story has on someone else, especially when it resonates with someone. And one of the most selfish things that you could do is die without ever sharing your story. because you have all that wisdom, all that life experience, because no one will ever live the same exact life with the same exact circumstances as you. So it's like, as we continue to share our story, as we continue to share our experiences, the collective consciousness of us, all of us, right, starts to rise because we're continuing to feed back into it and continuing to grow. And so a lot of the times, like, this collective consciousness is filled with a lot of negativity. It's filled with a lot of stress, a lot of insecurities, a lot of things, limiting beliefs. That's why we stay stuck, and it takes breaking out of that so that you could help the people that are still stuck in that. And even if you're in the process of breaking out, like saying, hey guys, I'm headed that way. Who wants to come with? There might be a couple people that take the bite and go with you. There might be no one, but knowing that you still have to embark on that journey and figure it out and get through, so that you can help other people kind of get back or get through and break through.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's why I like, on the builders, we tell stories from the trenches. That's our whole thing. But I feel like that's, people learn from that and they get inspired by that. It's just another way to teach people instead of just, hey, here's some tips,
Yeah.
So the podcast is, how many episodes you got going on, and where are you at with the podcast?
Yeah. So at this point in time, episode 75 just dropped this past Sunday from the day we're recording. I got the next 30-ish, like 33 episodes are already recorded, ready to go. So we're on track to hit 100 episodes on May 3rd. I'm doing like a big party in person for that. And then from there, I'm going to probably ramp up to start doing. Right now, I'm doing 2 episodes a week, occasionally 3. But once we get to 100, I'm also have an intern from college that I'm going to be hiring. So she reached out to me. And it's funny because opportunities open. I started looking into potentially hiring out and leveraging. She had reached out to me months ago to ask, hey, John, how do I get into real estate? And I was just sharing advice with her of how I got my license. Fast forward, now this is months now. Now, she reached out to me a couple weeks ago from the time of recording. And she was like, hey, John, do you happen to know any real estate agents in your office that are looking for media interns? And so I asked her, are you looking for paid or paid and experience? And she said paid and experience. I was like, hey, I could help you out there. I've taught hundreds of realtors social media, and that's something I didn't mention here, but I've been doing that kind of on the side for a little while now. But I've been teaching hundreds of realtors. I was like, I could teach you some things or two. Like I could show you the ropes a little bit. And my goal from there is, she's going to be graduating, I believe, in May, in the beginning. So once she graduates, it's going to be a 7-week internship, 30 hours per week, paid and experience. So my goal is to help her learn from what I've done and then help her get her own independent social media gig going where she can start booking clients. Because I know tons of people in the real estate space, and I know tons of people in the real estate space that need help with social media. And so I can get her connected and on the road. She'll help me organize everything and get everything going, learn some things, and then hopefully weeks 4 to 7, then or maybe 5 to 7, onboard my own VA. And then so I can keep the ball rolling once she leaves. So it's like definitely going to be a win-win. So we got a lot of big guests coming up, lined up. And so I'm super excited of where we're headed now that I'm starting to land some big guests. Like I have the president of Keller Williams coming on the podcast. I'm landing some big people. So that's kind of where we're at now. We hit top 5% globally last month. I spoke at PodFest Expo last month as well down in Orlando. So we're definitely projecting, as I said, in the right direction.
That's fantastic. You're doing awesome.
Trying my best.
I mean, it's just, how are you getting these big guests and stuff? Are you just because you're the networking you're doing, or the people you know through others, getting the word out?
So this is something that I learned from real estate. It's called circle prospecting. And so in real estate, when you have an open house or you have a house that just sold, you circle prospect the neighbors in the area and get them interested and spark some interest. So that's something I learned in real estate. With podcasting, you essentially do the same thing. Now, I wasn't strategic at all about it last year, but this year I got extremely intentional with it, and it's starting to pay off. So my first big guest was, I had this guest called, they're in the payment processing industry. I interviewed them in August. The episode dropped September. and they have like close to 150,000 followers on Instagram. And so fast forward now, when I was researching them prior to our interview, I seen that they were on this one guy's podcast, and he has like 1.4 million followers. So, mind you, big difference, 150,000 and 1.4 million, super big difference, right? That's almost a million person difference.
Right.
I had reached out a couple weeks ago from the time we're recording this. It's like, hey, I've been following you for almost 6 months now, ever since I interviewed so-and-so. I know they were on your podcast. A little bit about the show. We just hit top 5 globally, and I talked myself up for media, like 2 lines. And then I was like, I'd be honored to have you as a guest. What do you think? And they was like, yeah. And so I have him scheduled to be on the podcast in April. And now I'm like just doing that with other people. It's like, hey, I've interviewed this guy. You know, he has a big following. Now it's like when I reach out to other people, I try to look at to see if they have names of people that they like mutual followers and try to tag those people. But because I just now started this, I don't really have many people to tag. So I'm just using the 3 biggest names that I have. And now I'm reaching out to more people. It's like, hey, I've already interviewed these three guys. I'm shifting the perspective from I would be honored to have you on my show to because I've had so many amazing guests, you should be honored to hop on my show. Right? Because then it's a no-brainer to say no. Once the more guests I get that are high value, high level, then the more credible the show becomes to other guests when I reach out. Because in order for someone to agree to hop on your show, they're pretty much vetting the show. They're pretty much saying that, hey, this show was worth me spending 30 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour of my time to sit down and talk to this person. Most of the times that you don't really know, and when they can be doing so many other things. And so I'm just circle prospecting my way higher and higher up the food chain.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you're being more strategic about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, like for me, for this podcast, I started out solo just to make sure I could show up every week.
Yeah.
And then I invited a friend on, and then another friend, and I started having friends on. And then I started getting people would refer people to me, or I had one person on, they referred like 3 or 4 people, and then it just kind of grew from there. And then I'm on Podmatch and finding people there. And but this year, like you, I'm starting to be I have a couple VAs that help me in other parts of my business and stuff, and we're doing. One's doing a lot of outreach for me, and so I'm going to leverage her a little bit to actually help me target some specific types of guests that I want. So that's one way, like topic wise, like I want to kind of more variety than I'm getting now, and like more techie side of things, and just very specific. And so I can able to, navigate that a little easier and get some more interesting gifts.
Yes, on
some more gifts on some more guests.
And it's one of those things too where as your show grows, like in terms of episode count, like once you get to episode 100, you're almost like inducted into like the podcast hall of credibility. Since like just for making it, because most podcasters don't make it past episode 7. So if you could just get the triple-digit podcast episode numbers, then some people will just hop on your podcast for the simple fact that you made it to 100 episodes. And they don't even care about the guests. It's like, oh, you made it to 100 episodes? You're probably serious about this. You probably have something good going on. Yeah, I'll agree. And then as I said, as you start landing more guests, now it's like I created a Dream 100 list. And so I have like the top 100 people that I personally want to interview that have helped me out.
Nice.
And then I also created a list of 40 or so people. I was just asking people that follow me in the podcast, who would you want for me to interview? There was a lot of overlap, but there's also some people on there that I never heard of before. So I started following them as well. And now my way is to start circle prospecting my way and, checking the boxes and hit 1 guest and then 2 guests and then keep the guest list going until I get everyone on there eventually on the podcast.
I love that. So on the podcast itself, what are the kind of the biggest stories what kind of topic wise, what are you mostly focused on? I know you walk to.
So there's 4 main pillars, right? Mindset, because that's how everything in my life changed. It's starting from within. I believe there's 2 main parts. Now this is just my personal adding on. There's the reflection piece. That's the piece where you have to learn more about yourself so you can get into self-mastery. And then there's the transformational piece, which is becoming the person that you need to become in order to get to where you need to get to, right? So that's just my own add-on. But we talk about mindset a lot. We have several people on the podcast that talked about mindset. And then the next step is personal finance. So we have a lot of people on there that talked about personal finance, because if you're not a master of your own finances, God forbid you get a business and you start making some money, because that's just going to go out the window. The third main pillar is entrepreneurship, because there's no better way to take life into your own hands and to create a life by design than creating your own business and being your own boss. A lot more responsibility, but we have a ton of entrepreneurs on there that talked about it. And then the fourth pillar is real estate, because if you talk about wealth, you're not going to find any book that doesn't bring it up. It's a no-brainer. You have to find a way to get into real estate some way, shape, and form, whether it's wholesaling, whether it's syndications, whether it's fix and flipping, whether you're giving out, doing private money lending. Everyone has their hands tied up in real estate some way, shape, or form. So the main four topics are mindset, personal finance, entrepreneurship, and real estate.
Those are all very impactful. Yeah, that's great. That's great. You have a roadmap like that, a structure. 4 pillars, holds the whole structure up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you, John. I feel like there's a lot more I would love to dig into. Maybe we can come back someday. And but I'm looking forward to following your journey as well. I'm going to be definitely listening into your podcast, and hopefully we'll see where you go with your life, because you're just starting out, man.
Yeah, I'm still fresh into it.
You're so fresh. Like, I wish. Nah, I'm not going to say that. If I was your age and I knew what I knew now, yeah, hindsight is always 20/20. But yeah, great having you on. If somebody wants to find you, I mean, you can mention your podcast again, or you're on social media. You got a website. Where can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks again for the opportunity. It's always great catching up with you, man. I mean, we just now kind of met, but it's like we're already friends already. I feel like we have a lot of resemblance and resonance in our stories. So it's just like catching up with a good friend. So if anyone wants to find out what I got going on and tune into the story, you can find me at www.walk2wealth.com. That's 2 with the number 2, so www.walk2wealth.com. That's where you can come check me out. That's where you can find the social media links and everything. You can connect with me on everywhere from there.
Awesome. I like that one place. Find me everywhere. Awesome. Yeah. Until next time. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.